Have you ever been here before? Stop for a second. Look around you. Look at the screen you are watching. Listen to the sound of my voice. Does it feel familiar? Not just familiar, but exact. Imagine you are walking down a street you have never visited. The air is cold. You turn a corner and suddenly a strange sensation washes over you. A red car passes by. A bird flies from a rooftop. A stranger drops their keys. And in that split second, time seems to fold onto itself. You haven't just seen this happen. You feel, with terrifying certainty, that you have lived this exact moment before. You know the car was red before you fully saw. You knew the keys would hit the pavement before they made a sound. It feels like a memory, but it has no past. It feels like a prophecy, but it has no future. It is a ghost of a moment, a hiccup in reality. We call it déjà vu. The term itself is French. It literally translates to already seen. It was coined by the French philosopher Émile Boirac in 1876, but the experience is as old as human consciousness itself. It is a universal phenomenon. Statistics tell us that between 60 to 80% of people will experience it at least once in their lives. It doesn't matter if you are a scientist in a lab, a monk in a temple, or a soldier on a battlefield. The glitch does not discriminate. But what is it really? Why does it feel so unsettling? Why does your heart rate increase? Why do you feel a sudden, creeping sense of dread, or perhaps a strange sense of euphoria? For centuries, this feeling has haunted humanity. To the poets, it was a sign of a past life. To the mystics, it was a glimpse into a parallel dimension. And to modern science, it is a misfire, a short circuit in the complex wiring of the temporal lobe. Tonight we are going to peel back the layers of this mystery. We are not just going to talk about brain chemistry. We are going to explore the terrifying possibility that your mind is not playing tricks on you. We are going to ask the question that keeps us awake at night. What if déjà vu isn't a mistake? What if it's a message? Close your eyes. Let's go back to the beginning. Before we had MRI machines to map the brain, before we had psychology to label our behaviors, we had stories. Imagine being a citizen of ancient Greece. You are walking through the agora, and suddenly the feeling strikes. You freeze. You have heard this conversation before. You have seen this sunlight hit the marble pillar at this exact angle. You wouldn't call a neurologist. You would go to the oracle. In ancient times, déjà vu was often interpreted as a divine signal. It was seen as a breach in the wall of time. St. Augustine, the great theologian, wrestled with the concept of time and memory. He referred to these false memories as traces of the soul. The idea was that the soul is eternal, wandering from body to body, from life to life. When you experience déjà vu, the ancients believed, you are momentarily remembering a fragment of a previous existence. Think about the implications of that. The Platonic view suggests that all knowledge is actually recollection. We don't learn new things. We simply remember what our eternal souls already knew before birth. In this light, déjà vu is not an error. It is a moment of perfect clarity. It is the veil lifting, just for a second, to show you that you have walked this path 1,000 times before. But not all interpretations were so romantic. In the Middle Ages, during the height of superstition, such uncanny experiences could be dangerous. To know the future, even for a second, was the trait of a witch or a demon. If you felt you had lived a moment before, was it God showing you the path? Or was it a demon whispering in your ear, trying to trap you in a cycle of madness? Let's move forward to the Victorian era, the era of seances, spiritualism, and the obsession with the afterlife. Writers like Charles Dickens and Sir Walter Scott describe this sensation vividly. Dickens, in David Copperfield, wrote, "We have all some experience of a feeling that comes over us occasionally, of what we are saying and doing having been said and done before in a remote time, of our having been surrounded, dim ages ago, by the same faces, objects, and circumstances." Notice the phrase, dim ages ago. There is a profound melancholy in déjà vu. It feels like nostalgia for a place you have never been. It is a homesickness for a time you cannot name. Even Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher of the Übermensch, toyed with a concept that feels terrifyingly close to déjà vu, eternal recurrence. The idea that time is not a straight line, but a circle. That we are doomed or blessed to live this exact life over and over again, for all eternity. Every pain, every joy, every mistake, and every victory. If Nietzsche was right, then déjà vu is the most horrifying realization of all. It is the moment you realize, I have done this before, and I will do it again. You are trapped in a loop, and for a split second, your memory wakes up to the prison of time. But let's step out of the shadows of philosophy for a moment. Let's turn on the harsh lights of the laboratory, because as the 20th century dawned, we stopped asking the priests and started asking the doctors, and what they found inside the human brain might be even stranger than ghosts. Welcome to the machine. To understand déjà vu scientifically, we have to look inside the most complex object in the known universe, the human brain. It is a wet, biological computer processing millions of bits of data every second. And like any computer, sometimes it lags. For a long time, scientists ignored déjà vu. They couldn't study it because they couldn't produce it in a lab on command. It is a ghost phenomenon. But then they found a clue in a very specific group of people, patients with temporal lobe epilepsy. Before a seizure, many of these patients report an intense, overwhelming sense of déjà vu. This gave researchers a map. It pointed them directly to the medial temporal lobe, the area of the brain responsible for sensory perception, speech, and most importantly, memory. Inside this region, there are two key players, the hippocampus, which is responsible for short-term memory formation, and the parahippocampal gyrus, which handles familiarity. Normally these two work in perfect sync. You enter a room. The gyrus says, I see a chair, a table, a lamp. The hippocampus checks the files and says, we have never been here before. The result? A normal experience. But in déjà vu, something goes wrong in the wiring. There is a theory called the dual processing theory. Imagine your brain has two separate cables delivering information from your eyes to your consciousness. Usually the data travels down both cables at the exact same speed, arriving at the same time. But what if one cable is slightly slow? What if there is a delay of a millisecond? Here is the terrifying part. Your brain receives the image of the room from cable A. It processes it. A millisecond later, the exact same image arrives from cable B. Your conscious mind is confused. It says, wait, I've already processed this information. Because you did, a millisecond ago. But your brain interprets this lag not as a microsecond delay, but as a distant memory from the past. You aren't remembering a past life. You are remembering the present moment, twice. You are haunting yourself in real time. There is another theory, even more unsettling. It involves the amygdala, the fear center of the brain. Sometimes, déjà vu comes with a feeling of dread. This suggests that the glitch isn't just visual, it's emotional. Your brain mistakenly fires a recognition signal, But because it can't find the actual memory to match it, it panics. It leaves you suspended in a state of knowing everything, yet knowing nothing. So, is that it? Just a biological error? A hiccup in the synapses? For the materialist, yes, the case is closed. But for the psychologist, the explanation isn't that simple. Because sometimes the brain doesn't just misfire. Sometimes it lies. Memory is not a video camera. It is a storyteller. And like any storyteller, it embellishes, it edits, and sometimes it completely fabricates. Psychologists propose a different explanation for déjà vu, one that doesn't rely on short circuits, but on the architecture of how we store information. This is called the hologram theory. Imagine you are in a friend's new apartment. You have never been there. But suddenly, the feeling hits. You know this place. Why? Look closer. Look at the rug on the floor. Maybe that specific pattern, that specific shade of red, is identical to a rug that was in your grandmother's house when you were 5 years old. You don't consciously remember your grandmother's rug. That memory was buried deep in the fog of childhood. But your brain remembers. Your brain sees the rug in the new apartment, and it grabs onto that one familiar fragment. But instead of saying, "Hey, that rug is familiar," it makes a leap. It takes that one piece of the hologram and projects the feeling of familiarity onto the entire room. It is a cognitive illusion. Your mind tricks you into thinking you know the whole picture when you actually only recognize a single pixel. This leads us to the concept of cryptomnesia, hidden memory. We consume so much information, movies, dreams, photos, stories we heard half asleep. These fragments float in our subconscious soup. When reality aligns with one of these floating fragments, we experience a shock of recognition. Maybe you dreamt of a conversation like this. Not exactly this one, but similar enough that when it happens in real life, your brain screams, "Match found." But there is a problem with these theories. They explain the familiarity. They explain why a room feels like another room. But they do not explain the precognition. They do not explain the people who say, "I knew he was going to drop that glass before he did." They do not explain the sensation of predicting the immediate future. If the brain is just lagging or just matching old patterns, how do we account for the feeling of anticipation? How can you remember a future that hasn't happened yet? Unless time isn't what we think it is. Unless the past, present, and future are not separate rooms, but one single folding sheet of paper. Now, we have to leave biology behind. We have to leave psychology behind. To find the final answer, we have to go to the edge of reality itself. We have to talk about quantum physics and the multiverse. We can talk about neurons and holograms all night. We can comfort ourselves with the idea that it's just a brain error. But theories work best in a laboratory. They tend to fall apart in the messy, terrifying reality of everyday life. Because sometimes déjà vu isn't just a feeling. Sometimes it brings physical evidence. Let's look at a case shared anonymously in an online archive of anomalies. Let's call the subject David. David was driving on a highway he used every day to get to work. A routine Tuesday. He was listening to the radio. Suddenly, the feeling hit him. A wave of nausea, a ringing in his ears, and then the absolute certainty that he had lived this moment before. But this time, it wasn't vague. He knew what was coming. In his mind, he saw a vivid image. The blue truck in front of him would blow a tire. It would swerve into the right lane. It would hit a red sedan. David, paralyzed by this memory, the only thing his instinct told him to do. He slammed on his brakes in the middle of the highway. The car behind him honked furiously. 3 seconds later, pop. The blue truck in front of him blew a tire. It swerved right. It smashed into a red sedan. Exactly as he had seen it. If David hadn't braked, if he hadn't trusted that glitch, he would have been crushed between them. Science says David's brain processed the wobbly tire of the truck subconsciously, milliseconds before it happened. That's the prediction theory. But how could he know the color of the sedan in the other lane before it was visible? How could he time the impact to the exact second? This brings us to the most unsettling type of déjà vu, déjà rêvé, already dreaming. Thousands of people report dreaming of a mundane event, breaking a specific mug, hearing a specific news headline weeks before it happens. They write it down in dream journals, and then, one day, reality catches up to the dream. Is the brain simply guessing? If so, the odds of guessing a license plate, a specific sentence, or a car crash with 100% accuracy are mathematically impossible. So if the brain isn't guessing, and if the brain isn't lagging, then we are left with a possibility that frightens the scientists, but fascinates the physicists. Maybe David didn't predict the future. Maybe he remembered a timeline where he didn't hit the brakes. Maybe he remembered a timeline where he died. Welcome to the multiverse. If biology cannot explain the prediction, and psychology cannot explain the accuracy, then we must look for the answer outside of our own heads. We must look at the fabric of reality itself. In 1957, physicist Hugh Everett proposed a theory that sounded like science fiction, the many worlds interpretation. The theory suggests that every time a quantum outcome is possible, all of them happen. Every time you make a choice, the universe splits. In one universe, you turned left. In another, you turned right. In one universe, David hit the brakes. In another, David died on that highway. According to theoretical physicist Dr. Michio Kaku, these universes are not far away. They are right here. They are in the room with you, vibrating at a different frequency, just like radio waves. Right now, in this room, there are hundreds of radio stations broadcasted through the air. You can't hear them because your radio is tuned to only one frequency. Our reality is just one station. But what happens if the frequencies cross? Theoretical physicists speculate that déjà vu could be a momentary decoherence, a glitch in tuning. Imagine that for a split second, your frequency aligns perfectly with another version of you in a parallel universe. You're both walking down the same street. You're both thinking the same thought. You're both seeing the same red car. For that brief moment, the walls between the worlds grow thin. You aren't just feeling your present, you're feeling theirs too. The vibration resonates. This explains the prediction. Maybe the other you is half a second ahead of me. Maybe in their timeline, the glass has already fallen. The information leaks from their reality into yours. Think about the implications of this. It means you are never truly alone. It means there are infinite versions of you, living out every tragedy and every triumph imaginable. And perhaps déjà vu is the only way these versions can touch. A cosmic handshake, a signal that says, we are still here, we are still walking the same path. But there is one final theory, one that is older than quantum physics, one that is far more terrifying than a parallel universe. What if there are no other universes? What if there is only this life playing in a loop? Friedrich Nietzsche, the great philosopher, proposed a thought experiment that haunts me. He called it the eternal recurrence. He asked, What if a demon crept after you one night, in your loneliest loneliness, and said to you, "This life as you now live it, and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more. Every pain and every joy, every thought and every sigh, the exact same sequence, forever, like an hourglass that is turned over again and again. If time is a circle and not a straight line, then you have been here before. You have sat in this room before. You have watched this video 1,000 times before. You will watch it 1,000 times again." In this terrifying theory, déjà vu is not a glitch. It is a memory. It is a moment where your consciousness wakes up to the loop. For a split second, you realize you are walking a path you have walked for eternity. You know what comes next, because it has always come next. Some say déjà vu is a checkpoint, a sign that you are on the right path, the path you are destined to walk. Others say it is a warning, a desperate attempt by your soul to change the script, to break the cycle, to make a different choice this time. But did you? Did you make a different choice? Or did you do exactly what you were always going to do? The next time the feeling hits you, the next time the world stutters and you feel that cold shiver of recognition, don't be afraid. Just ask yourself one question. Is this the first time I'm living this moment? Or is this just the first time I remembered it? Wake up. Go to a mirror. Right now. Lock eyes with your reflection. Don't blink, just stare. At first you see yourself. You see the face you have known your entire life. You see your eyes, your nose, the scar on your chin. It is familiar. It is you. But keep staring. Give it a minute, 2 minutes. Slowly something terrifying happens. The features begin to separate. The eyes become just glass spheres. The skin becomes just a texture. The face in the mirror stops being you and starts becoming a stranger, a biological object staring back at you. A cold shiver runs down your spine. You feel a sudden urge to look away, to break the connection, before that stranger does something you didn't tell it to do. This phenomenon has a name. We call it Jamais Vu, French for never seen. It is the dark opposite of déjà vu. In déjà vu, the unknown feels familiar. In Jamais Vu, the familiar becomes suddenly, violently alien. Imagine walking into your own kitchen. You know it's your kitchen. You bought that table. You painted those walls. But for a split second, it feels like a movie set. It feels fake. You feel like a ghost haunting a house that doesn't belong to you. It is a glitch in your reality processing. A moment where the emotional connection to your world is severed, leaving you alone in a cold, unrecognizable universe. Is it madness? Is it a brain? Or is it the only moment when you're actually seeing the world as it truly is? To understand why reality breaks, we must first look at how language breaks. Try this experiment. Pick a common word. Door. Say it out loud. Door. Again. Door. Keep saying it. Over and over. 50 times. 100 times. Door. 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 Suddenly the meaning evaporates. It stops being a wooden object that opens and closes. It becomes just a sound. A weird, guttural noise made by your throat. It sounds alien. Psychologists call this semantic satiation. When a neuron fires repeatedly without rest, it stops reacting. The brain gets bored. It strips the meaning away from the signal, leaving only the raw data. Now, apply this to your life. You wake up in the same bed every day. You see the same partner every morning. You drive the same road. Your brain is bored. It stops processing the meaning of these things. And then, one day, the filter falls off. You look at your best friend, and for a terrifying second, you don't see a friend You see a human organism. You see a collection of skin and bone. You know their name, but you don't know them. The mask of familiarity has slipped. This is the mechanism of Jamais Vu. It is your brain deciding to stop lying to you. It is stripping away the pain, showing you the gray concrete underneath the reality you built. But sometimes, it's not just the meaning that vanishes. Sometimes, it's the love. In 1923, a French psychiatrist named Joseph Capgras encountered a woman known as Madame M. Madame M was not crazy in the traditional sense. She could talk, cook, and dress herself. But she had one specific, terrifying belief. She believed that her husband was not her husband. She admitted that the man looked exactly like him. He had the same voice, the same scars, the same memories. But she insisted with absolute certainty that he was an imposter, a double, a perfectly crafted robot or actor sent to replace the man she loved. This is the extreme end of Jamais Vu. We call it the Capgras Delusion. Here is what happens in the brain. There is a wire connecting the visual cortex, which recognizes faces, to the amygdala, which produces emotion. When you see your mother, the visual cortex says, "That's Mom." The amygdala says, "I feel warmth, love." But in Capgras patients, that wire is cut. The visual cortex says, "That looks exactly like Mom." But the amygdala is silent. There is no warmth. There is no feeling. The brain cannot handle this contradiction. It asks, if this looks like her, but I don't feel anything, then it cannot be her. Logic dictates a horrifying conclusion. This must be a copy. Imagine living in a world filled with identical strangers. Imagine looking at your own child and seeing a soulless mannequin. Jamais Vu is not just a trick of the light. It is the realization that familiarity is just a chemical, and without it, everyone is a stranger. Why does the brain do this? Why does it sever the connection to reality? Sometimes it's a defense mechanism. When pain, stress, or trauma becomes too much to handle, the mind pulls the emergency brake. It unplugs you from the world. Psychologists call this derealization. Patients describe it as living behind a pane of glass. The world looks flat, 2D, cartoonish. Sounds are muffled. Colors are too bright or too dull. You are walking down the street and suddenly you feel like a pilot controlling a meat suit. You are not in your body. You are watching it from a distance. The traffic, the buildings, the sky, it all feels like a background projection. Jamais Vu, in this context, is a safety feature. It is your brain saying, this reality is too painful. I'm going to make it fake so it can't hurt you. But there is a darker interpretation. What if it's not a defense mechanism? What if it's a technical error? Let's go back to the computer analogy. In a massive open-world video game, the computer only renders, draws, what you are looking at. When you turn your head quickly, sometimes the machine struggles. The textures don't load fast enough. You see a gray, unformed shape before it becomes a building. The simulation theory suggests that our reality works the same way. Déjà vu is a loop in the code. Jamais vu is lag. Imagine you walk into a room too quickly. The server that runs our universe loads the visual data. The walls, the chairs, the lights. But it fails to load the metadata. It fails to load the emotional texture that tells you this is your home. You are standing in a room that looks right, but feels empty. It feels like a 3D model without a soul. For a few seconds, you are seeing the simulation naked. You are seeing the wireframe of the universe before the code catches up and overlays the feeling of familiarity. Have you ever looked at a word and thought, why is it spelled like that? Have you ever looked at your hand and thought, why do I have 5 fingers? This looks weird. Maybe you are spotting the cracks in the design. And Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, wrote a novel called Nausea. The protagonist sits in a park and looks at a tree root. Suddenly the label root disappears. The function disappears. He is left staring at a black, knotted, terrifying existence. He realizes that names, meanings, and familiarity are just thin stickers we paste over a chaotic, indifferent universe to make us feel safe. Jamais vu is the moment those stickers peel off. It is the moment you realize that you are a consciousness trapped in a dying animal, spinning on a rock in a black void. Everything you think you know, your name, your home, your family, is just a story your brain tells itself to keep from screaming. So, the next time you look in the mirror, the next time the face staring back at you feels like a stranger, don't panic. Maybe that stranger is the real you, and maybe, for the first time in your life, you are finally awake.